Now, but I want to talk about you. How did you get into esports in general? Like, were you always a League player? Did you start somewhere else and then go over to League? How did that work? Talk about your journey a little bit.
I started playing Dota in high school because there was an after-hours Dota school club that you could donate or give $1 and they'd give it to charity, and then the teacher would set up all the computers for you to play Dota. And at the time, I didn't have internet in my house. So what I did was I put the game inside a flash drive, took it to my house, and then connected a LAN cable from my computer to my brother's computer. And then we played 5v5s, 1 against 1 with 4 bots on each team, and we just played a MOBA that way. And we were interested in it because our friends played Dota, and we knew that we were going to have internet soon in the house, and so we just wanted to practice it. And then by the time we had internet, like, yes, we'll make a battle.net, let's go play Dota online. And my friends immediately say, we're done playing Dota, we're playing League, download this. Like, all right. And so downloaded League of Legends, and at the time I just started going to university and I didn't want to go at all. I hated going to university. It's because I just moved to Canada, so I didn't even know what Canada was about. So signing up for university on top of that just was such a confusing experience for me when I had so many other questions going on that I figured, well, I'm just going to play League of Legends instead. And so I just did not do my homework, did not really focus on university, put all that energy into League of Legends. And I ended the first split, or the first season of League, because this was like the first season period, with the most ranked games played. Like, I don't think anybody else played more ranked games than I did. And it was, I think, top 5 or maybe top 10, one of the two. I was very high ranked. And there was a tournament happening in Atlantic City where a team had one member who was under 18, and he needed to be over 18 to attend because it was happening inside a casino. And so what they did to find the next best player to sign up for was just go through the list of people in the top 10. And then it turns out that I was the only one that wasn't on the team that was over 18 that could go. So they invited me to substitute for them. All paid trip to Atlantic City for the weekend. If we did well, we would make some money and then get flown back. And so we got second place, and I got $1,000 for that. And I got an offer from a team at the same time. So when I came back, I thought, wow, well, look at what just happened, right? I could just do this from now on. And so I took that offer in the team, and I was still going to university. This was going to Crumbzz Gaming at the time. I was just playing jungle. I didn't have a role at the time. I just played whatever I wanted. And so now I started to refine my gameplay, play on an actual professional team that was paying me a salary. And then another offer came around saying, hey, if you join our team, we'll fly you to Korea for a boot camp and you can compete there for a few months. So I thought, I don't even care how good this team is. I just want to go to Korea. And so I joined that team. That was Team Dignitas. And then we went to Korea, got our asses handed to us, but it was fun. And then lo and behold, Riot says, hey, we're having an LCS thing. Here's a presentation. Look at our plan for you to come to Los Angeles and live here and play here. And at the same time, I was thinking, do I want to go to university next year or go do this? This seems way more fun. And then I just did that, played on Dignitas for a few years. And then after playing for a few years, kind of fell out with the team, started a new team. We qualified from ranked all the way to the LCS, which it was an amazing experience. Just 5 people could become an LCS team worth millions of dollars. And we did that right before the window closed. And so that was really exciting. But after that, I had a kind of abrupt ending to my career. Even though my playing was kind of falling down, it wasn't so much because I was getting bad, but rather my work-life balance was completely off, and I didn't really know how to take care of myself that way. And I think partially it's because of the way that I approached the game in the first place, right? It was just, let's just go do the game and forget about my other responsibilities. And that ended up biting me after like 5 years of doing that. And so afterwards, I didn't get an offer to join the team, and it was in the middle of the year. So I figured, well, I don't want to wait half a year and keep grinding without anything, since I can't join a ranked team and do the same thing again. So I could be a coach, and I'll try being a coach, because I want to end up being a caster because I've done some work on the analyst desk for fun. It was very enjoyable meeting all these people, talking about the game that I love. And I just did coaching for a bit because I thought, no matter what, I can always do casting later. The window's still open, and I can learn a bit more about another side of the game to better communicate with the audience about what it means to be a professional player. So I did that, and then immediately I wanted to be a coach or a caster, but then visa problems happened because I'm Canadian, and so I couldn't do it. It was like 6 months where I couldn't do it, so I was just stuck there in limbo. And then an opportunity arose where I could go to Korea to do casting there, and I thought, wow, I loved to Korea the first few times, so I went to Korea. I cast there for a bit. It was a really rough time, but it was very fun. And then at the same moment, Overwatch League asked me, hey, do you want to come do Overwatch League for an inaugural split? And I thought, well, this seems like a new challenge. And I'm still having visa problems in Korea anyways, so I'm just gonna go do this then. And so I did Overwatch League for a year, and then that was kind of rough. And then I stopped doing that for after 1 year. And then I thought, well, you know, I trust my skill in something. I'll figure something out. And then after I did Overwatch League for a year, the LCS asked me to come back. And I thought, great. All right. Yeah, I like doing this. I loved working there for the past few years before. I'll do it again. And then I've been there ever since. That's been the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you mentioned, like the burnout can get very real, you know what I mean, especially with games, because you always have to keep on top of it. There's patches every month, sometimes every other week, and different metas in different countries and regions, and you have to be on top of all of it all the time. And you can easily, not take care of yourself. You know, your health is your wealth, but if you need, you can only work 14-hour days for so long before you break. And it sounds like you did that for 5 years. It's pretty impressive before you broke.
Yeah, for sure I was feeling the damage. And only now do I look, if I were my own parent looking back at myself, like, oh, this poor child, who can help him? But luckily, if you go so fast, you're likely to crash harder and realize where you went wrong.
During that time, you originally born in South America, and you mentioned you're Canadian, but from being born in like Venezuela, did you have any adversity you encountered over these 5 years of playing League and switching teams and LVS and Overwatch? Any stories you could share? Absolutely no adversity. It was a clean way the whole way through. Yeah. I'd like to hear that. That's good. So talk about, there's a lot of turnaround in esports. I think the longest team that you were on, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was Dignitas in 2012 to 15 or 16, right? That was the longest kind of seat you had. But a lot of pro gamers switch seats every 6 months, 3 months, sometimes less than 30 days. What do you think? Do you think that's good for the sport? Do you think it's just how it is? Do you think that's how it's going to be? Do you think that's going to change in the future? I think in the future, it's going to be really hard for a full team to stay together. Even on Dig, I don't think we had that much time with the whole lineup staying together the whole way through. Because like when we started, I Will Dominate was on the team, and I was a top laner. But then he got banned, and so now we needed to find a new player. And then once we found a new player, then another player gets kicked, and then another player gets kicked. And so for the core 5, the same 5 to stay together, feels like it's something that has rarely happened in League, unless you're on a strong winning team. Unless a winning team has found the right formula, then they'll do their hardest to stay together. But if a team even wins, but they feel like there could be improvements in a certain role, they'd rather take the chance to power up with somebody that has shown them in that year that they are a potent player, that they can add more to the team than their previous member, and just keep getting stronger that way, because they know that the competition isn't just local, it's international, and they must be as strong as possible. And so on the one hand, you can take the chance and see if the whole team can improve, but oftentimes people feel like seeing a player play for a full year and seeing how they improve that year gives them an understanding of their trajectory for the next, which is false to assume. Not in every case has that happened, but they'd rather say, let's just take the guy that we know kicked his ass all year long and see if we can do better with him. What do you think we see so many athletes, not in your case, because you transitioned to commentating and coaching, But what do you think we see some of the other athletes just kind of quit esports and go the full-blown Twitch influencer route?
Money for sure. Yeah, it just pays more. I think you can do your own hours and you can interact with your own little community. And I think a large part of it was that it was much more money than anything else at the time, and I think still is in the upper brackets of streaming. But I tried doing that for a while and I was doing very well. Problem was the burnout and the hours of it.
Yeah, we talked about that again. Yeah,
very long. Very long. You talk to a lot of these top streamers and you see their lifestyle, and it is very intense, right? It is fun in that you're playing video games and you're watching games all day, but they're working 12-hour days a lot of the time, right? They're doing this 6-7 hours a week, and it's not just that, it's content that gets put on different platforms. It's a constant rethinking of how they talk to their audience. And what I noticed at the time that I didn't like about that job was that it felt like it didn't lead me to develop new skills that I wanted for myself in life. That I felt like the people that I saw doing this chose to stay in a certain place and be very successful doing it, but not necessarily grow in the way that I wanted to. And so that is why I chose to move away from streaming, because I didn't want to have that. And I think the confirmation that it was the right choice for me was looking back into some of the peers that I had started streaming with, that they kept doing it the whole way through, and seeing how they can speak to me and say, you know, and sometimes I wish that I had taken your route and just given myself more time to experiment and do other things instead of doing this one thing. And now I'm in my mid to late 20s and I don't feel like I actually have a lot of life skills. You know, I have money and streaming and a little community here, but when it comes to taking care of myself, the health, wealth mantra that you mentioned, they're lacking. And so I do think that it is the right choice, and that's something that in the future probably won't be addressed very much, because people will just want to stream as much as possible if they're doing really well. But it's something to think about. It's not a job that comes without its downsides, like all other jobs.
It's definitely interesting. I do wonder, like with Gen Z, and even I think it's Gen Y, the one before them, like this is now an option. Like the people are getting scholarships based on how good they play Counter-Strike or League of Legends or whatever. And it's actually a real pathway now, when you were kind of at the beginning of it as well, kind of moving around before there was even like any kind of league structure, right? It was still the Wild West. But now that it's more formulated, I wonder how many more influencer Twitch streamers, programmers will see try to take that route, and how that will affect just the regions in general. With like you said, like you're really good at the game and you're really good at streaming and talking, but then what other life skills do you have? You know, and you're doing that 12 hours a day. So like your mental health is falling. I'm really curious to see how this will go moving forward. Maybe it'll be better structured, or maybe it'll be more accepted, or I don't know. It's still a definitely interesting time for esports and streaming in general, for sure.
I think that the streamlining of the path to pro doesn't seem to actually give or yield the same high skill players that we've seen in the past before. I think especially when it is related to education, it seems to just not be the point of developing a highly competitive individual that is just going to flourish in the professional scene. Because when I look to a place like China and how they go about the development of a professional player, and maybe that will change now with the rules that they have implemented regarding video games on a national basis, but a lot of it is super focused on just playing the game. It's not so much about your studies. It's really about, we are here because we think that you are good, and we are going to take care of everything else for you. Just play the game and get really, really good at it, instead of finding a work-life balance for it. And that's the area where a lot of people frown upon is, oh, well, a lot of these players are really sacrificing other aspects of their life to become the very best of the best. And it's absolutely their prerogative. And in fact, I think that's how people get to the top when you're looking at an international competition. You know, in your local tournament, sure, you don't have to try that hard to beat 20 people in your town that play League of Legends. But when the world is competing against you, you know that just sacrificing more and more of the other aspects of your life that don't directly benefit your skill in the game is going to make you better. And so the best players are super focused on that. And it's nothing new that is only in video games. It's in every single field. The very best of the best have only time for that, and that's why they're so good, because they have given all their time and energy to their craft. So I think that's something that's just going to always continue. It's fun to see how good these players can get, because every time they're inventing new mechanics and showing off more and more, and the game gets faster and faster, and they can still keep up with it and become more impressive. So it's fun to see how the game gets more explosive and the players as well can match it.
What do you think esports needs to do as a whole? And we can specifically talk about League because that's what you're expert in. Need to really hit that, to really punch through that ceiling. Because you know, like at times you get these huge numbers like in the Staples Center that are equal to an NBA playoff game, which is huge in terms of esports and video games. But the numbers still aren't quite there to be as big as, you know, as football. Like they're climbing. But what do you think the LCS or just League in general can do to punch a hole through that ceiling to really start to climb up and show real growth year over year?
I think it's just time. I really think it's time, because the one aspect that those other sports have over League is that they have had generations raised under each other. The father of a fan was a fan of the team. The father's father was a fan of the team, and so forth, and watched a sport and brought their kid up into it. Right now, I think the League viewership is a little bit older, right? It's probably in the mid-20s, maybe even late 20s. And so it's prime time to start having kids. And so I think that once the game can continue for a bit longer, and then you can have fans of an esport, not just League, but any game in general, and fans of gaming in general, raising kids to be interested in gaming, to be as devoted to esports as their parents have been, then you're really going to start to see those numbers grow and grow, because those generational ties will not only be increasing the amount of people watching them, but for a lot of people represent a bond with family. And so that's going to be a really strong part for the growth of esports. So I do think that it just needs time, and it's on a right trajectory. There's obviously some fumbles, some places where it can improve and ensure that it doesn't get too far off the mark, like what we discussed with burnout and how people can better take care of themselves while still being a fan of whatever it is that they're watching. But it's just gonna need more people to be born to be raised under the guise of video games.
Okay, what do you think about how age has to do with it? Because obviously when you're younger, you know, when you're 16, 17 or 18, you kind of have a different view of the world than you do when you're 28, you know, like early 30s. Like you kind of look at it differently. Like, I mean, I'm sure when you're like, when this was first starting, it was, you know, dream come true. You're going to put me in a house by myself when I'm 18 and pay me $10,000 a year plus prize money. This is the dream, right? And then as you get older, you're like, well, actually that probably wasn't a good idea. But what do you think the age has to do with it? I mean, obviously we at Shacknews, we joke and say that anyone over 30 is a senior esports athlete, because it seems that all of them retire so young. Like, what do you think age has to do with esports as these kids get older and the younger generation starts to step in?
I mean, there is something to be said for younger players that essentially have less in their minds that isn't League of Legends, right? If you take somebody that is 13 playing the game versus somebody that is 30, that 13-year-old is usually just thinking about League of Legends and nothing else, while the 30-year-old might have so many other things going on through his head, and so he can be more focused on just playing the game. But I do think that while age influences your interest inside the game and your mechanics, You can be mechanically proficient in a later age if you take care of yourself, if you do prioritize your health and make sure that you put in the extra work. As aging players realize that younger talent is going to be stronger than them, they realize they have to put in more work. I think one of the best, if not the best player right now is a Chinese mid laner, Doinbi. He recognizes that he's getting older and he puts in more work than he did when he was younger to keep up. And so that's what makes him so much greater than a lot of other players. He recognizes this. In North America, we've got poor JJ. He puts in more work than the younger players because he knows that it needs to happen or else he won't keep up. Ends up being one of the very best. But I think the biggest thing that forces retirement from players is actually the interests that come with aging in other aspects of life. It's not so much that they fall off and don't necessarily enjoy the game, it's that other things just seem to catch their attention. Relationships, the fact that you can now take some more time off for yourself and that you can just do whatever you'd like, focus on another skill that you want, because the game constantly changes. And so it's not like the game that they started playing is the same one that they're playing now. It's constantly evolving. And if you hit a patch that you don't like, you're gonna be a little bit less interested. Maybe you landed yourself on a team that you weren't that thrilled about because it was the only offer that you got and you didn't want to take a early retirement. Then you're gonna be looking at other aspects of your life in general, and maybe you like making content, you like streaming on the side, and so you start to develop interests outside of the game. You're hanging out with your friends that you have from League, but you're going out to music festivals or just going out for food, etc. So you end up developing a lot of other interests. Maybe you'd like to take up fitness, all these sorts of things. And I think that ends up contributing to a large part of the early retirement from players, because let's face it, when they are young and a teenager and get jumped right into being a professional gamer, that time that would normally be used for the transition from teenhood into adulthood that comes with soul searching and a better understanding of oneself is entirely paused, right? There is really that isn't really happening there. And so it's going to happen later. And when it happens later, then they'll realize, you know what, I think I want to do this instead. And then they can move on to that. And hopefully they found success in the earlier years that they can easily springboard onto something else.
Do you think you'll ever go back to playing League professionally, coming back in the circuit as a 28-year-old pro athlete?
I still play probably more than I should on solo queue, but I don't think so. I really enjoy the communication and the team aspect, but when I think of if I were to be playing versus shouldn't a kid that just wants to play all day long take that spot instead, and I think that makes more sense. Being a coach, that could be an option that makes more sense, but to be the one in front of the computer playing all day long, that just isn't me anymore. And if I were to do that, you could really tell how desperate the scene is for players.
Yeah, it feels like it's just time and energy put in. As you get older, it's less of it, and as you're young, you can put so much into it. It just doesn't, because nothing matters, right? And then when you get older, you're like, well, I can't do that 12 hours. I can't just practice for 12 hours. I have to do other things.
My
like
back,
laundry.
My back. Like, I'm not sitting on gaming chairs all day, right? You gonna make me sit on gaming chair? No, that's not.
My laundry.
Yeah.
To go outside. You know? But I guess when you're younger, you don't think about that stuff. A good example I like to give is like if it was up to me, what I would eat when I was 12 years old, it was a pizza every day, right? Think about how terrible that would be as an adult to have pizza every single day.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, I mean, yeah, your mind's just different when you're younger. It just is. Well, that's great, Alberto. So what's next for you? Like, were you going to continue to cast and commentate, coach? Like, what's going on with you in the future other than the solo queue we talked about in the beginning?
Yeah, I'm going to continue working on broadcast, because for me, broadcast is part of the development of just being a better communicator for me. And so I really enjoy the game. I enjoy the workflow that happens with it. And I enjoy having been part of something for such a long time. It's surreal at this point that it's like I started playing this game 10 years ago, I think. So to see that it's something that has now taken up such a chunk of my life and there's still success to be found with it is really exciting for me. So I'll be still be working on the LCS show, and taking small little side tournaments that add more to the tournament scene of League of Legends in general, whether it's the Red Bull solo queue tournament, a collegiate scene, a Twitch rival scene, whatever it is. I think all of these things help to make the League of Legends ecosystem more stable, and so I'm happy to see that continue. It's given me a lot, and it's time to give it back.